The night was cold in Oritamefa, a small village surrounded by dense forests. The wind howled through the trees, carrying whispers of unseen spirits. Inside a grand but silent house, Zuberi, a 14-year-old girl with deep brown eyes, sat near the fireplace, hugging her knees. The flames flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. She wasn't afraid of the dark. She was afraid of the woman watching her from across the room. Her stepmother, Nia, draped in a silk wrapper, stood with her arms crossed, her lips curled into a fake smile. To the villagers, Nia was a vision of beauty, a woman with flawless skin and a voice as smooth as honey. But Zuberi knew the truth. Behind that mask was a heart blacker than the night itself. Since the day Zuberi's mother died, her father, Ekene, had become distant. He had remarried Naya, hoping to bring peace back into the house. But peace never came. Naya hated Zuberi. She saw her as an obstacle, a shadow standing between her and complete control of Ekene's wealth. That night, as Ekene prepared for a long business trip, Naya's eyes glowed with something dark, something dangerous. As soon as he left, she summoned her most loyal maid, Funmi, to her room. The two women stood close, their voices hushed but sharp. "She's in my way," Naya whispered, her voice like a knife cutting through the silence. "As long as she's here, I can never have full control. We need to get rid of her." Funmi swallowed hard. "But madam, if something happens to her, the chief will—" Nia grabbed Funmi's wrist, her nails digging into the maid's skin. "Do you think I'm a fool? It has to look like an accident, something natural, something no one can question." Funmi shivered as Nia leaned in, her breath cold as she spoke the next words. "Take her to the old hunting lodge in the forest," she said, her smile stretching wide. "There's a pack of wolves there. Lock her inside and let nature handle the rest." Funmi's hands trembled, but she dared not refuse. No one disobeyed Nia and lived to tell the story. Outside, the wind roared louder, almost as if it had heard the wicked plan. Inside, Zuberi remained by the fire, unaware that this was the last night she would spend in her home. By sunrise, she was supposed to be nothing more than a tragic mystery, a girl who walked into the forest and never returned. But fate had other plans. The night was heavy with silence, the kind that made the air thick and uneasy. The full moon hung in the sky like an unblinking eye, casting silver streaks over the village of Oritamefa. Inside the grand house, Naya paced the floor with a sly smirk, her silk robe trailing behind her like the tail of a serpent. Everything had fallen into place perfectly. Ekene, her foolish husband, had left at dawn for a long business trip, leaving his precious daughter in her care. The naive man had no idea that by the time he returned, his daughter would be nothing more than a tragic tale whispered around village fires. Zuberi had spent the day in her room, staring out the window, lost in thoughts of her mother. She missed her warmth, her laughter, the way she would stroke her hair and hum soft lullabies when the wind howled too loudly. But those days were gone, and in their place stood Nia, the woman with eyes as cold as death and a heart darker than the forest at midnight. Zuberi knew something was wrong when the maid, Funmi, entered her room with a face drained of color. The woman wouldn't meet her eyes, her hands trembling as she placed a tray of food on the table. "Eat," Funmi said, barely above a whisper. Zuberi frowned. "I'm not hungry." "You should eat," Funmi urged, but her voice cracked. Before Zuberi could question her strange behavior, the door swung open. Two guards stepped inside, their faces unreadable. A shiver ran down her spine as one of them took a step forward. "You need to come with us," he said flatly. Zuberi's stomach twisted. "Why?" No answer, just a firm grip on her arm. "Let go of me!" she cried, trying to pull away, but the other guard grabbed her, forcing her hands behind her back. Panic struck her like lightning. "Where are you taking me?" Still, no answer. Only the sharp, bitter laugh of Naya echoing from the hallway. Terror flooded her veins as a rough cloth was tied around her eyes, plunging her into darkness. "Please, stop," she begged, thrashing against their grip. "I didn't do anything wrong." Naya's voice was smooth as silk. "Oh, sweet child, this is not about what you did. This is about what you are, a problem. And tonight, we solve problems." Zuberi's breath came in sharp gasps as she was dragged out of the house, her bare feet scraping against the cold earth. She could hear the distant sounds of the village, the faint murmurs of people unaware of the horror unfolding just steps away. The guards forced her into a wooden cart, the rough surface digging into her skin. The sound of horse hooves echoed in the night as they rode away from the only home she had ever known. With every mile, The familiar sense of the village faded, replaced by the damp, musky air of the deep forest. The further they went, the colder it became. The eerie hoots of owls and the rustling of unseen creatures made her skin crawl. Then, somewhere in the distance, a chilling sound sliced through the night. A howl, low and mournful at first, then another joined in, then another, until it became a chorus of hunger and death. Zuberi's heart pounded violently. "No," she whispered. "Please, not this." But her pleas fell on deaf ears. The cart came to a stop. Rough hands yanked her out, her legs nearly giving out beneath her. The blindfold was ripped away, and she found herself staring at an old, crumbling hunting lodge. The wooden door stood slightly ajar, swaying with the wind, its hinges creaking like a ghost in pain. Naya stepped forward, her face a mask of amusement. The moonlight made her features look sharper, almost inhuman. "This will be your new home," she said mockingly. "Or at least, what's left of you by morning." Zuberi's breath came in ragged gasps. "You can't do this." Naya leaned in, her lips curling. "Oh, but I already have." The guards shoved Zuberi forward, and before she could react, she was thrown inside. She stumbled, falling to her knees, her palms scraping against the rough wooden floor. Then, the door slammed shut behind her. Click. The sound of a lock snapping into place sent ice through her veins. She scrambled to her feet, rushing to the door, pounding with all her strength. "Let me out, please." Naya's laughter was the last thing she heard before her footsteps faded into the distance. And then, silence. Number, not silence. Breathing, low, heavy, not human. Zuberi turned slowly, her body trembling. Her eyes adjusted to the darkness, and that's when she saw them. 6 pairs of glowing golden eyes staring at her from the shadows. The wolves. Her breath hitched. They were thin, their ribs pressing against their fur, starving, desperate. The biggest of them, a silver-furred beast with jagged scars across its face, took a step forward, lips curling back to reveal sharp, glistening fangs. A growl rumbled through the air. Zuberi backed away, her legs shaking so badly she nearly collapsed. This was it. This was how she was going to die. Alone, forgotten, torn apart in the middle of nowhere. Tears stung her eyes, but she didn't dare move. One wrong step, one panicked scream, and it would all be over. The wolves inched closer. Their breath was hot, their hunger undeniable. Zuberi's heart pounded so loudly she was sure they could hear it. She closed her eyes, whispering the only prayer she could remember. But in the back of her mind, a strange voice whispered something else, something her mother once told her. Fear is the greatest weakness. Even the wild can sense it. And in that moment, as the wolves drew closer, she made a choice that would change everything. Zuberi gasped as the blindfold was ripped from her face. Her vision blurred for a moment, adjusting to the darkness. She blinked rapidly, her heart pounding like a war drum. The air smelled of rotting wood, damp earth, and something else, something musky, wild, and dangerous. She was inside an old hunting lodge. The walls were cracked, the wooden beams above her creaking with the weight of time. The floor was covered in dirt, scattered with old bones, their edges sharp and hollow. A single broken window let in a sliver of moonlight, casting eerie shadows across the room. Then she heard it, breathing, slow, heavy, not human. Her body stiffened as she turned her head. Golden eyes. 1 pair, 2 pairs, 3, more. A pack of wolves, their thin, starved bodies barely visible in the darkness. Their ribs pressed against their fur, their noses twitching as they caught her scent. Zuberi's breath came in short gasps. She pressed herself against the cold wooden wall, her fingers digging into the splintered surface. Running was useless. There was nowhere to go. The only door had just been locked from the outside. From beyond the wooden barrier, she heard Nia's laughter. It was light, mocking, full of satisfaction. "This is the end for you, little one," Nia's voice called. "By sunrise, there won't be anything left." Her footsteps faded into the night. She was gone. Zuberi was alone. The wolves inched closer, their nails clicking against the wooden floor. Their eyes gleamed like molten gold, their sharp teeth flashing as they snarled. The biggest of them, a silver-furred beast with jagged scars across its face, stepped forward. Its lips curled back, revealing long, gleaming fangs. Zuberi's knees trembled, but she refused to collapse. Fear was useless. Begging was useless. She thought of her mother. Fear is weakness. Even the wild can sense it. She swallowed hard, forcing her breathing to slow. If she panicked, she was dead. If she ran, she was dead. If she screamed, she was dead. The silver wolf growled, low and deep, sending shivers through her spine. The others followed, forming a tight circle around her. Their eyes flickered with hunger. They had been trapped here for too long, left to starve. Now, they had fresh prey. Zuberi's fingers curled into fists. Number. She refused to die like this. Slowly, she shifted her body, keeping her movements controlled. Her eyes never left the pack. She thought back to the stories the village elders used to tell, about hunters, about warriors, about survival. Never show weakness, never turn your back, never run. The wolves were waiting for a mistake. One wrong move, one step in the wrong direction, and they would pounce. The silver wolf growled again, louder this time. The others followed, their bodies tensed, ready to strike. Zuberi's chest rose and fell with deep, steady breaths. She did the only thing she could. She growled back. It wasn't loud, it wasn't strong, but it was enough to make the wolves pause. Their ears flicked back, their eyes narrowed. Zuberi stepped forward, just one step, just enough to show them she wasn't prey. The silver wolf tilted its head, studying her. Zuberi held her ground. She refused to shake. She refused to blink. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was their breathing. Then, something changed. The silver wolf's ears twitched. Its snarl faded slightly. It stepped back. The others hesitated, their glowing eyes darting between Zuberi and their leader. Zuberi didn't move. She didn't dare. And then, the silver wolf sat down. A deep exhale escaped Zuberi's lips. Her legs nearly gave out beneath her, but she forced herself to remain standing. She wasn't safe, not yet, but she was still alive, for now. Zuberi stayed completely still as the wolves moved closer. Their golden eyes studied her, their breath warm against her skin. She wanted to back away, but she knew any sudden movement could mean the end. Her mother's words came back to her. Animals can sense fear, but they also understand respect. She took a slow breath and made a choice. Instead of running or fighting, she lowered herself onto her knees. She kept her head slightly bowed, hands resting on her thighs. It wasn't submission, it was a message. She wasn't a threat, but she also wasn't prey. The largest wolf, a silver-furred leader with deep scars along its face, stepped forward. The others stayed back, waiting. The wolf sniffed the air, then moved even closer. Its sharp teeth were only inches away from her face. It growled low, watching her carefully. Zuberi did not move. She did not flinch. The wolf hesitated. Its ears flicked back for a brief second. She saw it. It wasn't just a wild animal. It was thinking, judging, deciding. And then, it stopped growling. Zuberi felt the shift immediately. The tension in the room changed. The wolf stared at her, but there was something different in its eyes now. It wasn't just hunger. Carefully, she lifted one hand. Slowly, gently, she reached out. The other wolves tensed, ready to attack if she made the wrong move. Her fingers touched the wolf's head. It didn't bite. It didn't pull away. It just stood there, allowing her touch. The other wolves, still uncertain, watched their leader. One of the smaller ones crept forward, sniffing her arm. Then, after a long pause, it licked her fingers. The rest of the pack hesitated, looking between her and the silver wolf. Then, as if following a silent command, they relaxed. Zuberi let out a slow breath. She had no idea how, but she was no longer just a prisoner in this room. She had just become part of the pack. Zuberi kept her hand steady as she reached out to the silver wolf. Her voice, barely above a whisper, carried a tune, an old lullaby her mother used to sing. The wolves stiffened at first, their ears twitching as the sound filled the silent room. Then, something unexpected happened. The silver wolf, the leader of the pack, lowered its head slightly. The tension in its body eased, and the deep growl in its throat faded. The others watched closely, their golden eyes flickering between Zuberi and their leader. She had no idea why, but she felt it. A shift, a connection. Carefully, she placed her trembling hand on the silver wolf's head. It didn't pull away. Instead, after a long pause, it did something that made her chest tighten. It licked her fingers, a slow, deliberate gesture. Acceptance. Zuberi swallowed hard, holding back the tears threatening to spill. The other wolves hesitated for a moment longer. Then, as if following an unspoken rule, they began lowering their heads one by one. They no longer saw her as an intruder, no longer as prey. She had become something else, something they recognized. And then it hit her, a memory, a story her mother had once told her long ago. on a quiet night by the fire. There was a time when I walked through the deep woods alone, her mother had said, and I found a pack of wolves, wounded and starving. The hunters had taken everything from food, shelter, even their leader. But I helped them. I gave them food, tended to their wound, and in return, they let me go unharmed. They remembered kindness, Zuberi. Even the wildest beasts remember kindness. Zuberi's breath caught in her throat. Was this the same pack? Was this destiny repaying an old debt? She looked into the silver wolf's eyes. There was something ancient there, something beyond words. It knew, it remembered. Her mother had saved them once, and now, years later, they were returning the favor. A wave of emotions crashed over her, but she forced herself to stay calm. She wasn't out of danger yet. She slowly stood up, moving carefully so she wouldn't startle. The wolves didn't react aggressively. Instead, they followed her movements, their eyes still locked onto hers. Django, the name she now gave the silver wolf, stepped closer. It nudged her arm gently, as if urging her to follow. Zuberi understood. This wasn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning. The sun rises slowly over the forest, casting a golden glow over the trees. The world outside is calm, but inside Nia's home, tension fills the air. She sits comfortably, sipping her morning tea, waiting for the confirmation of Zuberi's death. By now, the wolves should have torn the girl apart. There should be nothing left but bones. She turns to Funmi, her trusted maid, and waves a lazy hand. Go, she orders. Check the remains and bring back proof. Funmi hesitates. Something about this feels wrong, but she dares not question Nia. With shaky hands, she makes her way to the abandoned hunting lodge, each step heavier than the last. The silence is unsettling. There should be birds chirping, rustling in the trees. Something. Instead, the forest feels frozen, as if holding its breath. As she reaches the wooden door, her fingers tremble. She presses her eye against a small crack, expecting a horrifying scene. But what she sees nearly makes her scream. Zuberi is alive. Not just alive, standing tall, surrounded by the wolves like she belongs there. The silver wolf, Django, stands by her side, his piercing eyes locked onto Funmi's. The rest of the pack sits calmly, their sharp teeth and powerful bodies no longer a threat to the girl. Funmi stumbles back, her chest rising and falling rapidly. This is impossible. She turns and runs, feet pounding against the dirt as she rushes back to Nia's home. Nia is lounging in her chair when Funmi bursts in, gasping for air. The words barely escape her lips. She's alive. Nia laughs. A cold, sharp laugh. Don't be ridiculous. Funmi shakes her head violently. I saw her, with my own eyes. She wasn't just alive. She was standing among them, like she's one of them. The laughter fades from Nia's lips. Her fingers tighten around the cup in her hand. That can't be true. That must not be true. She rises slowly, forcing a smirk. You're imagining things, she says, but her voice is quieter now. Funmi steps back, fear evident in her eyes. Nia swallows hard. Zuberi should be dead, yet somehow she has survived. And worse, she has the wolves by her side. A chill runs down Nia's spine. For the first time, the hunter begins to feel like prey. The wooden door creaks open, and Zuberi steps out of the lodge, the cold morning air brushing against her skin. But she doesn't feel the chill. She doesn't feel fear. She doesn't feel weak. She walks with steady steps, her bare feet pressing against the damp earth. Behind her, the wolves follow, not as hunters, not as threats, but as guardians. Django, the silver wolf, stays closest, her piercing eyes scanning the forest as if daring anyone to come near her. Zuberi does not run. She does not hide. She moves forward, head high, shoulders back, with a presence she never had before. For the first time in her life, she is not afraid. She is not alone. The journey back to the village is silent, except for the soft rustling of leaves beneath their steps. The wolves move like shadows, their powerful bodies gliding effortlessly through the trees. Birds stop singing. The wind barely moves. It's as if nature itself is holding its breath, watching, waiting. As the village comes into view, Zuberi's heartbeat remains steady. This place, the place where she was once just a forgotten girl, no longer feels like home. It feels like a battlefield. The moment she steps into the village, chaos erupts. A woman carrying a basket drops it, yelping in horror. A man stumbles backward, his eyes wide with disbelief. Children scream and run, while the elders gasp, clutching their chests. Wolves! Someone shouts. She's brought wolves! Panic spreads like wildfire. People rush to grab weapons. sticks, knives, whatever they can find. The hunters reach for their bows, their hands shaking as they fumble to pull back the strings. But the wolves do not snarl. They do not attack. They stand like silent warriors around Zuberi, their golden eyes scanning the crowd, daring anyone to take a step closer. Zuberi's gaze sweeps across the fearful faces, and she sees it, the doubt, the disbelief, the whispers of the impossible. They expected her to die. They never thought she would return, and certainly not like this. She takes a step forward, and the crowd instinctively moves back. Even the hunters hesitate, their arrows shaking in their hands. This is not the girl they once knew. This is something else. Someone whispers, "She should be dead." Zuberi hears it, but she does not respond. She does not need to. Her presence alone is an answer. She was meant to die, but death did not take her. And now, she has come back. Not as a victim, but as something far more dangerous. She has come back as a storm. The air is thick with tension as Zuberi steps forward, her voice steady but sharp. She speaks not as a frightened girl, but as someone who has walked through death and returned unbroken. "The woman you call my stepmother," she says, eyes locking onto the village elder, "tried to kill me." Gasps ripple through the crowd. Whispers spread like wildfire. Nia stands frozen, her face carefully blank, but her fingers twitch, her body rigid. She expected Zuberi to be gone forever, not standing here, not speaking. The elder, an old man with deep lines of wisdom carved into his face, narrows his eyes. "Explain." Zuberi doesn't hesitate. She tells them everything. How Nia tricked her father into leaving. How she was dragged into the forest blindfolded, locked inside the abandoned lodge with starving wolves. She spares no details. The crowd listens in stunned silence. Some shake their heads in disbelief. Others murmur angrily, eyes darting toward Naya. But it is Funmi who finally breaks. The maid, who had been standing in the shadows, suddenly steps forward. Her hands shake. Her breath is unsteady. But guilt is heavier than fear, and she can no longer carry it. "It's true," she whispers. Then louder, "It's all true." Naya whips around, her eyes burning with rage. "You foolish girl!" But Funmi doesn't stop. The words pour out of her, like water breaking through a dam. "I helped her," Funmi confesses. "She ordered me to watch as the wolves tore Zuberi apart. She told me to bring back proof." Her voice cracks. I thought it was just cruelty. But now I see. It was murder." The village erupts. Angry shouts, accusations. Some call for justice, others for punishment. And then, a deep voice cuts through the noise. "Ekene." Zuberi's father has returned. He stands at the edge of the crowd, his traveling cloak still dusted with the dirt of his journey. His eyes, tired from the road, scan the faces before locking onto his daughter. His daughter, whom he thought safe. His daughter, whom he nearly lost. The crowd parts as he strides forward. Zuberi watches as his gaze shifts, moving from her face to Naya's. And then, slowly, the truth settles in. He doesn't ask. He doesn't need to. His wife's silence says enough. Ekene turns to the elders, his voice cold. "What will be done?" The village elder steps forward, his expression grim. He looks at Nia, then at the wolves that stand quietly behind Zuberi, their golden eyes watching, waiting. Finally, he speaks. "Naya will be exiled," he declares. "Banished to the very wilderness she thought she ruled." Naya stumbles back. "No, you can't do this." But the decision is final. The very place she sent Zuberi to die is now her fate to face, alone. The sun sets over Oritamefa, casting a golden glow over the village that once saw Zuberi as nothing more than a forgotten child. But she is forgotten no more. She walks through the village, not as the girl who was once cast aside, but as someone reborn. The people who once pitied her now watch in awe. Children peek from behind their mothers, whispering her name like it carries magic. Even the elders, the wisest of them all, bow their heads in quiet respect. Zuberi does not seek revenge. That would be easy, but she has learned that true strength is not in destruction, it is in wisdom. She chooses to rise above the hatred that tried to consume her. She chooses to lead, not as a queen of men, but as a force of nature itself. Nia's exile is swift. No one mourns her departure. She is sent into the very wilderness she once controlled, the same darkness she had hoped would devour Zuberi. But now, it is she who must survive it. The wolves remain. They do not leave, even after Nia is gone. They stay at the edges of the village, their golden eyes glowing in the night. They never attack, never threaten, but they watch, always watching. It does not take long for the village to understand. They are not here to hunt. They are here for Zuberi. She does not command them, yet they follow her. She does not speak their language, yet they understand her. She does not seek power, yet it flows through her. She is no longer just a girl. She is something more. Stories begin to spread beyond the village. Travelers speak of a girl who walks with wolves, a girl who was left for dead but returned untamed. Some call her a spirit, others a legend, but in Oritamefa, they know the truth. She is a guardian, a protector of those who have been cast aside, forgotten, abandoned. And whenever the village hears a distant howl at night, they do not feel fear, they feel safe, because they know Zuberi is watching. Zuberi's story is more than just survival. It's a testament to strength, wisdom, and rising above those who try to break you. She was thrown to the wolves, but instead of becoming their prey, she became their queen. But what if the hunted became the hunter? What if betrayal wasn't the end, but just the beginning? If you want more gripping, edge-of-your-seat stories like this, make sure to subscribe and hit the like button. And don't stop here. Check out the next videos on your screen for even more shocking tales of survival, betrayal, and unstoppable courage. You won't want to miss what happens next.